We're going to start off with a panel, and the title of it is, If Data is the Answer, What is the AI Question? Interesting, right? So let's get into it. I'm going to ask my panelists to introduce themselves briefly, and then we have a set of questions we're going to pose and get some insight. So,
Sure.
Pinar, you want to go first, please?
Sure. I'm Pinar Özkan. I'm a professor of entrepreneurship and innovation at Oxford University, and my research these days is on how large organizations are adopting AI. What are some of the do's and don'ts?
Thank you.
Fabrizio Antonelli, I'm Global Head of Data and AI at Swarovski, and I'm responsible of the strategy, the data and AI strategy and execution.
Thank you.
Hi, afternoon, everyone. I'm Naresh Raja. I'm the Chief Data and AI Officer at DLA Piper, which is a global law firm. I'm also a board advisor at Soprasteria and Data for Good, and advising a PE firm on data strategy and AI strategy.
Great. I'm David Poole. I'm Portfolio Director for Data and AI for a big private equity company called CVC Partners, about 186 billion under management, specifically working with QA, one of their AI learning divisions. Also do some work at the University of Oxford in the Machine Learning Research Group.
Cool.
Hi, everyone. I'm Betsabe Madani Herman. I'm the Global Head of Research at Philips, a scientist and engineer by training. Resting a cough, and formerly an entrepreneur and investor.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, all of you. Delighted you're here. Let's begin by cutting to the proverbial chase, if you will. So I want to ask you to share briefly how your organization is moving toward a data-led AI approach, and ideally share maybe one real-world example. Again, it doesn't have to be elaborate, but just people are interested in how people are using these technologies to drive attributable revenue, generate productivity improvements, tied to an ROI, obviously. Pinar, you want to go first?
Sure. So I'll give some examples from our research. Some of the low-hanging fruit when it comes to using AI is making sure that you're streamlining your processes, cutting costs. Perhaps you don't need as many people in a department, etc. But the real game changer is much more on the Gen AI side, and in particular, using the data that you have in your organization, whether it's siloed across different departments or not, to be able to use that to get 360 views of your customer and be able to then use Gen AI in order to design new products for them that they perhaps haven't thought of. I'll give you an example from, now it's 12 years ago, Amazon patented.
12 years ago.
12 years ago, Amazon patented a new type of shopping experience, which is rather than you shop and then they ship, it's ship and shop. So they trusted their AI so much that every week they could send you a box, and then it would be things that you never thought of, but then like, oh, actually, I might keep them. It's not working today because there's no regulation that permits them to use drones for delivery, because otherwise, with the things that you're returning, it will be too much. But this idea that you can get into your consumers' heads and make sure that you can actually give them things that they haven't thought of, and you can design them on the spot is very powerful. And I think that's where the value of Gen AI will be.
Wow, fantastic. Fabrizio Swarovski, what are you doing in the real world?
When you think about Swarovski, it's a luxury traditional company. It's not the kind of company you think first or come first when it comes to digital. Last year, we combined a few teams and few activities into an AI group. We created our Center of Excellence, and we built up our AI strategy. We started from the low-hanging fruit, right, with creating efficiency and creating ROI. A simple example, we are translating in over 20 languages every day, every single communication, legal
using AI tools?
Yeah, exactly. And we have 1,000th of the calls we measure every day for every single word translated. So it was creating a massive one. And then we enter, of course, into the personalization arena. We measure a 6 times ROI uplift compared to non-personalized CRM communication. And now we are very much focused on the supply chain part, where it's less generative AI, it's more AI, but it's bringing a lot of satisfaction.
Naresh, what about you?
So fundamentally what we've done is we built a data and AI strategy, and I really believe this is a symbiotic relationship between data and AI. And what that really looks at is how we got on top of our data. We're across 40 different countries, lots of data, unstructured and structured. We've actually got to a point where we've structured our data, got it to a good quality level, and it's enough in terms of excellence documents. We've then deployed a number of AI tools based on a buy versus build and a integrate strategy. One, looking at an AI assistant, which is grounded in our legal data and be able to create specific points around creating summarizations, emails, tier sheets, etc., a range of activity. I call that the teenager AI assistant that we've built. Then we've deployed fundamentally Microsoft Copilot, which is our productivity AI, and that is our what I would call our child AI in terms of what we've developed, and that is grounded in our data, but it's not intelligent enough in terms of our models. That we're using purely for productivity, both in terms of our front-facing legal teams, but also our back-end finance, ops, HR, etc. teams, just in terms of summarizations, email creation, document creation. We've also built a decision intelligence platform based on Azure Databricks, which is linked to 3 or 4 key signals that we built on Logic to predict M&A activity, distressed companies, really around selection of infrastructure funds. So that's much more intelligent for being able to do that with market data, specific logic, and then really a platform and a user interface for our teams to interface with. And finally, in terms of the legal environment, contracts are the order of the day. And really, we built a risk scoring tool on contracts to evaluate how risky a contract is and which ones our clients, but ourselves, we should be using over and over in the number of those things that we're developing. So it's a full-on, what we really thought about is what is a data and AI strategy, and I need to kind of emphasize that, and then how is that integrated with real value use cases, and then we've launched it with training, but also a real focus on prompt engineering and prompt libraries to train our people.
Wow, fantastic. David, QA, what's...
So we've spent a lot of time uploading most of our learning and training content into a platform. So this means that we can internalize all of the knowledge that we get, when we're working with clients. And so you can ask, our clients can say, I'm a investment bank, how advanced am I in my understanding of the technologies that underpin AI and data science compared to my competitors? And we can start to give them evaluations and help them with their, what you might call operational meta-learning. So it's all great training the individuals, but the organization needs to be prepared to be able to start to deploy AI. So we've been doing that. And just one really quick example in 30 seconds. We work with a big insurance company that sell domestic car insurance. And they said, well, here's 3 months of data. Can you find anything in the data that's interesting, any patterns or signals, any anomalies? And we basically found that there were about 400 people who had domestic car insurance that were going around circuitous routes around the country every day. And basically they were going to parcel collection centres and delivering parcels using their domestic car insurance, which is illegal. So it turned it into a revenue opportunity for them, because they said, we need to have a conversation with you about what you're doing. We know what you're doing. Wow. You need to increase your insurance by 20% to a business insurance policy, revenue generation, just using a simple single model.
Amazing. Betsabe, at Philips, tell us about what's going on there.
We started with what's the problem we're trying to solve. If you think about it, 4.5 billion people around the world don't have access to essential care services. This is healthcare. And the ones that do, the healthcare systems are under severe pressure. So there is clinicians talking about the burnout rates, the fact that there's shortage, and it's been very difficult to hire and recruit the way out of these problems, these pressures on our system. So it's about innovation, that's what actually it does for it. What data and AI and technology as a whole, and robotics as well, is helping with is it's augmenting hospitals and the care that the clinicians provide by adding precision and access to the care. So think about it this way. Here are some examples. If it takes a patient half the time to be taking an MRI exam, or if it takes the patient or the radiologist a fraction of a time to have the image processed afterwards, or have the positioning of the patient, that is time given back to the clinicians, to the system, that allows for more access to care. If you have the gaps of knowledge and the gaps of skill, and these are all related to real examples, crossed from someone who's been a surgeon with 300 hours of surgery under their belt, neurosurgery, with someone who's just a resident. If both of them can actually perform at a close enough level of performance, that's two surgeons, not one, that could do the same thing, and you can deploy that. So how do we actually cross those barriers and bring more care to more people around the world and create more precision for that? We have clinical data insights, procedure automation that we work on. There are some examples of products like SmartSpeed MR and many more all across Philips, and this is across all of our businesses. Even in our what we call personal health, which is our toothbrushes and shavers business, we look at how do we actually improve them using AI.
Wow, great. So incredible real-world examples. Thank you for sharing. Since our theme is, if data is the answer, what's the AI question, I want to get into the data conversation a little bit with all of you. So we all know that this data that we're manipulating with AI is heterogeneous, right? It's owned by a lot of different fiefdoms, maybe in an organization. It's captured different ways. I mean, the U.S. government is still running COBOL, and Fortran examples is pretty scary. So let's talk about how you deal with data silos at a meta level, right? Because that's key to deploying effective AI. Naresh, I want to start with you. How are you dealing with, in financial services, that's, protected, proprietary, risk-averse data, if you will, so, and a lot of different places.
Sure.
How do you manage?
Yeah, I mean, I spent nearly 15 years with 3 financial services institutions, Barclays, Lloyds, and Danske Bank, as a chief data officer. And I was fundamentally an SMR, which is a senior management regulated by the regulator. That gives, in financial services, it kind of focuses the mind because you're personally accountable in terms of anything going wrong post the financial crisis. Don't think I was at Lloyds because that's pre-financial crisis, but the last 2, definitely I was. But the key part is, and I've always thought about in terms of data, is defense and offense, and creating a data strategy that balances defense and offense. And the data foundation that we can build, which actually addresses both defense and offense, is the same. So if I give an example, that data foundation covers fundamentally your data management, so really getting a clear view of what is the critical data that one holds. So in banking, one of those institutions, we came from 40,000 data attributes that could be in lending, credit card, savings, etc., and customer data. We brought that down to 1973 critical data attributes or critical data elements. And our whole initiative in terms of quality, platform, lineage, etc., was built out of that 1973 critical data sets. The second part of data foundation is the platform, is selecting the right data platform in which one is going to put the right infrastructure in, the security, the privacy, data protection, but also how are you going to have lineage so you can get from source, when we collect data, customer data especially, all the way through to insights, analytics, data science. And that's the foundation by which banks have traditionally approached it, and we've done that in the last 3 institutions I've worked at, but also other institutions. And then if we talk about that and align it to AI-ready data, which is how do you then utilize that methodology and framework? And that's why I really believe on a combined data and AI strategy, which means that you're able to fundamentally get hold of your data sets really clearly, curate it, strengthen it, and create that foundation, which is going to power a number of things in terms of insights and analytics. Yeah. And then in terms of AI-ready data is the models by which that data is trained on, you're really then clear in terms of good quality, effective data sets by which the models are trained on. And that could also be proprietary data, confidential data, and data that you hold on behalf of your clients. Yeah. And that's the strategy. So one ask from me, and I'm sure you can ask at the end, is whenever your board comes and talks about the AI strategy, please ensure you've got the data and AI strategy, and building that data foundation is a key component of that.
So an important part of it is like sort of rationalize what the critical data is that you really need to point the AI at, because you have so much information. So a rationalization process is
absolutely
key to getting it underway, right?
Absolutely.
Betsabe, you had some examples you wanted to share.
Sure. Actually, since we're talking about the importance of data, I'll share this. To me, the analogy I have is you can have the best models in the world. If your data is not correct, then it's like putting a jet engine on a tricycle. So what is it going to do? I mean, it may fly, but you really want to fly that engine. What we work on is working very closely with partners. So we had a recent announcement, it's now public, so I can actually talk about it, with Mass General Brigham, where we're working with clinicians directly hand in glove on how do we provide clinical data insights using AI models for clinicians, and we're starting in cardiology, that's the space. But the data and the work we're doing is actually verified right there with physicians as well. Same thing when it comes to procedure automations. We're working on robotics procedure automation in image-guided therapy, and the work we do there is also, again, hand in glove with partners. We bring our toughest critics to actually work with us because that's the best thing to do early on. They can point out every single potential flaw, and you can fill those gaps before you actually have gone too far. The exact same thing also applies to working with regulators, et cetera. But that partnership so close with people who understand the data, understand the procedures, own the data perhaps, and working with them in the insights it brings you and verified. I mean, it's a human verification in a way. On top of it, is what makes us be able to do something that is really grand, and it's joint with these partners.
That's great. Yeah, feedback, the breakfast of champions or whatever, right? Like,
Exactly.
what are the clients saying? Peter, I want to get your takes from, from an academic perspective. When you're talking to entrepreneurship students, what guidance do you give them for dealing with data silos and ownership issues and
So yeah, that's a big deal. And one of the things that I hear, especially now with the AI revolution, is do you need digital transformation if you have AI? Can you just leave your silos where they are and then just use AI to kind of get information from them? I mean, obviously, technically it's possible, but it's like, running your machine at full speed for 24 hours every day, whereas if you actually centralized your data, it would be a lot more efficient. And one of the examples I want to give on that is a US financial company, which the AI department was actually quite clever. In dealing with data silos, they said, okay, there's no way that we can access all this data in order to train our models, but we really want to have a centralized data pool in this firm. So they actually bought external data and train their models with that to convince the top management what the world could be if they had the data that they needed. And once they got top management on board, then of course, the CIO was commissioned with creating a centralized data pool, and things started to go much better. So a lot of times, I think it's about making sure that that digital transformation step, that all that data becomes harmonized and cleaned up. It's extremely important. You can't really do AI in an efficient way without it, but there's also a political angle.
Yeah. I want to follow on that thread. So, and get into the conversation around, RAG, right? So retrieval augmented generation, where you have sort of protected, vetted, validated data, and maybe it's behind the firewall, and that's what you can use to deliver, safe solutions, per se, with AI. But to your point, it doesn't really give you a broad landscape in terms of all the data that you could use to make decisions around, how the business gets improved or grows. What's your take? David, I want to ask you about, managing sort of, RAG, protected data, if you will, validated, vetted with publicly available data that could be, valid or not, and will influence hallucinations or inaccurate results from queries?
Yeah. So, RAG is very interesting, retrieval augmented generation. So the big problem with these models is, getting models to generalize, to be able to do everything, putting into a command, what's the capital of Peru, answer this maths question, translate this to the... Generalization is really complicated and very, very computationally expensive. So there is a move for organizations to have an internal model. You've probably heard the word agentic AI, which means giving these models agency to make their own decisions and think more for themselves. And so that's really the future is, we're not building models anymore from scratch. We're not even building the features of a model. The models are already pre-built and we train them through adaptation. And one of the best ways to do that is through using your own data, keeping it within your firewall. We're seeing this a lot. So we do work with WPP, big advertising advertising agency, and they've just generated their own model internally. Coca-Cola have done the same thing. They have a model called Coke GPT. It's just what model that was based on. So this is what's happening right now, and it enables. We use data now as a proxy for experience, and the more experience you have built into the model, the more effective it will become, and we're seeing a lot of that across organizations.
So sort of along that line, do you think there's anything as too much data? I mean, when training AI models?
No.
Will you ever get to that
You can
point?
never have enough data.
I think, if I may, I think I'm going to disagree.
Yeah.
I think,
Please.
I think there's a combination of internal data and external data.
Yeah.
And not all data is equal. So I would always say that, especially around why does hallucinations occur, is because the models have actually started to make hypotheses and assumptions which end up giving a view. So we had a couple of simple examples where we created our own AI model on OpenAI 4.3. It's our own fundamental positioning. And that we grounded in legal data in 6,000, 7,000 data excellence documentation. And that is to minimize the level of hallucination. So I would always say not all data is equal, and more data doesn't mean it's better from an AI standpoint. You've got to have the curated data sets and also the context in terms of domain. So if you're in financial services, the financial services domain is really important for both in terms of RAG, but also how the agent is going to operate in terms of your OpenAI. And the second part is language. And we're working with 40 different languages. Things mean very different in terms of in different languages. So the actual AI that you're going to generate, it has to understand business context, language, and also your organization to be able to operate effectively. That's why you've got to make sure the data set is really clear, and not all data is equal, and I don't advocate for more data.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. But if you think of driverless car technology, level 5, fully autonomous.
Right.
Do you want a model that's been trained on 1 million miles of data, or one that's been trained on, 1,000 million miles of data?
Or a trillion miles of
data. Or a trillion, so there are certain, you're absolutely right. You don't want to fill the model with, low signal data. But, even to the point where with driverless vehicles, if anybody uses CAPTCHA, I'm not a robot, which of these tiles, features a crosswalk or a, traffic lights? You're basically training a driverless vehicle model every time you're inputting data into that. So it's a way of strengthening that model again.
Yeah. Betsy, you wanted to say something?
There is a book that came out about 5 years ago. Has anybody here read it? AI 2041.
No.
By Li Kai-Fu. Okay, so it's 10 stories. I read a lot of.
Put it on a flip chart. If we had a flip chart, I'd write it.
Perfect.
But we don't.
There is 10 stories in here. I love sci-fi. I dive into the worlds of Le Guin, Asimov, and Clarke since I was a child. And it's also good about data and AI because you can think about the positives and the optimistic and the pessimistic views of a dystopian future. But this book has 10 sci-fi stories, and then there's an analogy by Li Kai-Fu right after. He was the president of Google China for a number of years and is an investor and one of the people that is at the forefront of thinking about all of this. And this thing came out 5 years ago. There's one chapter that I encourage anybody who's going to be able to pick this up, read. It's in healthcare, and it's Ganesh, the golden elephant, is, if you don't mind, I'll tell a quick story, is
please.
An insurance company. And it's embedded in people's daily lives. And what it does is it helps people make better choices. It helps this Indian family, for the father to quit smoking. It also helps the dad drive safer because that's how their insurance premiums don't go up, they come down. So it's like reinforcement, positive reinforcement. And all of a sudden, even though they're doing everything right, their insurance premiums increase. And the reason for that is their daughter starts posting some photos of her and her new boyfriend. This is a sci-fi story, it's all made up, right? On social media, but Ganesh has access to all of the platforms his family interacts with, and so pulls all the data from it. And this is where too much data could be bad.
Right.
And because it has the biases of the old systems in place, and this boy is from a different caste, of a lower caste, it's automatically assessing that this is associated with a lower health for their children, for this family, and so they're going to go to the hospital systems more. And as a result, their insurance premiums goes up.
Wow.
That is too intrusive, and that's the laws of unintended consequences that could happen. So when it comes to, I love this book, by the way. I really encourage you all to read it. And it was before all of the ChatGPT, even for the researchers when it was available. So it was quite forward thinking. Just wanted to plug that in there.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. there was a similar sort of ACLU video where like the guy calls in and orders a pizza and they have access to his data, and the woman taking the order says, well, I see that you're going on vacation next week and your pant size went up from 40 to 40. Order the extra cheese, you know. Pretty scary. I want to turn to a topic that's near and dear to my heart and probably of interest to all of you, which is around talent and workforce, right? The perennial driver of making all of this work at the end of the day, right? Without it, and education, which is the discipline that enables every other discipline. How do you talk about AI with students? How do you get them excited about it, or point them in the right direction, or share the risks and rewards of deploying AI solutions, especially Agentic, right? As Agentic comes on board, that's going to really change how we develop tools and how we apply them and where we apply them. So I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's both a great opportunity, but also, just like many other large organizations, universities are really struggling to keep up. And this is my personal opinion, but I think that every single subject in university now has to include prompt engineering. We need to figure out how to work with AI. Even if you're a psychologist, if you're a medical researcher, if you're a business person, you need to learn how to go about it. And I'll give you an anecdote. 2 years ago, when we were first starting to deal with AI being used by students, we had to reevaluate how we examine them. And several of my colleagues went to the Central University and said, we'd like to go back to pen and paper exams. And the university said, sorry, we've converted all those big classrooms into something else. You can't have them back. We don't have them anymore. So you have to figure out what to do. And I personally also think it's ridiculous in this day and age to test people with pen and paper when all the rest of their lives they're going to rely on AI. Yeah. So I think that as universities, we need to do a much, much better job in making sure that everybody knows how to use AI, and perhaps even more importantly, how to evaluate the results.
Yeah. Fabrizio, what about at risk? So that must be, a big change, introducing these kinds of tools to people who maybe are not familiar with them, or not comfortable with them, or not aware of the power that they can provide.
Yeah, I think for, let's say, standard task, I think the barrier or the fear of being exposed to this kind of tools has lowered. But our company, the core of our company is creativity, right? Whatever we do is about creativity, about creating beautiful jewelry. And what the promise of generative AI is to have creativity on behalf of the person, on behalf of the people. And this is where the adoption stops, right? Because there is a fundamental fear of a creativity-led company to be, let's say, replaced by generative AI. Even if this is not the case, last year we launched for the first time a tool that we train on our data to start initial design of jewelry, right? So that our creative teams can take inspiration and start building up. At the beginning, the answer was no, we don't want that. Then they realized that actually this tool is speeding up, especially for some kind of design, is speeding up a lot the initial phases. And now they're using more and more and more because they're shifting their perception of that from a tool that replaced them to a tool that can give us, for instance, an early estimation of the cost of goods where they are very bad. Creative likes to do the very bold pieces, but they don't care about the price of those pieces. So there's a kind of...
in the middle ground.
Exactly. So I think it's a journey, and especially in the creative part, that for me is a key part, also in the future for how we embrace AI, not just in the jewelry space, but in general. I think that's where we have to.
And I don't want to belabor it, but do you do internal training? Do you have programs? Is there education? That's key, right? How to use the tools and how to exploit them. And
we just launched in January an AI literacy program across all. We have 20,000 people across the globe, so we started implementing from the office population, not just about the tool, but all in all about the risk, the responsible AI piece, and so to let people embrace and perceive AI not just as a risk, but also as an opportunity, and to learn what are the, let's say, the benefit of using that, what are the tools, and how does this reflect in their day-by-day job.
Great. So I'm going to talk about sort of ethical implications of AI making decisions, right? That's a big topic. We're going to go up, wax philosophic here for a moment, right? What's your take on, how we can manage these tools? To what degree should we regulate? We regulate atomic energy. Everybody has to wear a seatbelt. There's a EU AI Act, which I think is a laudable first step. Maybe constrictive, restraining innovation. We were talking about that before. You're going to put some guardrails around it, but it may limit what people can do with it. Who wants to respond to that? David, do you have a take on that? Managing?
Yeah, I mean, we have to do it. This is a very, very new area still, and so I did some work on drug discovery at Oxford University a few years ago. And when you give these models kind of unconstrained power, to cure cancer and things like this, all of these models turn the compounds into toxins. And yeah, it's going to kill the cancer, but it's going to kill the So it's kind of, okay, let's bring it back and pay it out. So I think it's really understanding the art of the possible, but, we do need guardrails. And as you say, we have the EU AI Act now, and a lot of work on general models. Some of the frontier models come in to play, I think, in August. Prohibited AI, where you're using AI without any human oversight to make decisions in companies, that's now banned within the EU. So I think we are, and there's an interesting graph actually that shows the number of incidents that have happened with AI and the legislation that's followed it. So we are, every time something happens, we legislate against it, but it's a very new area.
Yeah.
I mean, I can add to that.
Yeah,
Chris. I think the EU AI Act is derided quite, I think, unfairly. It really, if you read into it, there isn't anything there which any responsible business would want to do and work that through. Yeah, sure. So really looking at your AI, what is the purpose of the AI that's been generated, how it's going to be used, what are the guardrails in place, what is the information in terms of how data is treated. So it's all common things that one would do. I think two things around that part that I would urge everybody else, and this is what we've done, is we need to make sure the ownership sits with us. And the human in the loop is who's the accountable executive who is actually accountable for anything that either will go wrong or something that you're actually making sure that the AI models are going to do. And then coming back to answer that question in every type of scenario is quite useful in terms of the use case. The second, and what we've done is a number of, and I think following on what David said, is a lot of training for our people, that they are trained in terms of how to use it, what not to do, and really in terms of moving that forward. Finally, is actually some accountability. So for what it's worth, we've actually asked each individual employee to take accountability for what they're using AI for. Now, we're fairly sure from a legalistic standpoint, the organization is going to be held accountable. But if it's what we need to be really thinking about are the bad actors. And what I fear is what's going to happen in terms of an unregulated space is when a black swan event happens or bad actors really get in the way, we're going to then become over-regulated, and it's far better that organizations take accountability themselves.
Yeah, great. So we've come to the end, the flashing 2-minute warning, but I want to ask each of you to share words of wisdom, right? You're all experts, thought leaders in this space. Maybe take 30 seconds and one piece of advice for organizations starting the AI and data journey. Betsabe, please.
It's for everyone, actually, not just for organizations. And I think we should learn from kids, children. They're adaptable and they're very curious, and their critical thinking grows. But as adults who have developed some critical thinking, I hope, it's important to stay as curious and as resilient and as adaptable as a child.
Great. David.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just to that point, our brains work on 20 watts of power. So why are we using, generative models that require 1,300 megawatts of power an hour to solve really simple problems? And I think what we'll see is model efficiency really coming into play. Why use a deep learning model or a generative model when we can use a really simple statistical technique and get the same inference?
Great. Naresh.
I think going back to the topic that we were looking at is build that data and AI strategy in an integrated way, and then focus on value. So what are those use cases that really generate value, and then really focus on those use cases?
Yeah, for me, it's about going away from, so going to the title of this event, to reach the ROI, you have to be transformational. So the time for POC or MVP is over. I think we already had 2 years of credit. This year would be the year where we have to demonstrate that AI can bring value. So don't go bold or don't go there.
Yeah. And
I want to follow on that theme. One of the issues that is very apparent in many of the organizations that we work with is something that we call the paradox of caution with AI. When you start experimenting with AI, with low-risk experiments where you don't use your critical data, then naturally the value that you get from it is also low. And in those very frequent cases, it becomes very difficult to convince top management to really go bold and do it differently. So I think when it comes to AI, you can't start low risk. You have to go in full water.
Great. Well, we've come to the end. Please give the panelists a hand.